Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever the fuck you're watching this. This is another episode of the Rosinbaggers podcast brought to you by Backyard Sports. Ty, how you doing tonight, bud?
Doing well. Good to be back on the Rosinbaggers podcast. I appreciate you reminding me what podcast we were doing tonight because it has been a little bit of a hiatus. We've all have, of course, other than our podcast duties and our podcast lives, we all have things going on outside that, which sometimes can interfere with the baseball season. But glad to be back and getting back into the swing of things, if you will. Lots of exciting baseball action. I know we've just peaked into May, just primarily, but a little over a month in, and action certainly starting to heat up around the league. Lots to talk about on today's pod.
Absolutely, and you mentioned it's been a little while, and some things have changed, some things have not. The Rays are still the best team in baseball, still dominating, still winning just about every time they play. We have some teams at the bottom of divisions that we're going to talk about a little bit here. Unlikely, candidates for basement dwellers, especially looking at the World Series, defending World Series champs. And Nats, they're yeah, I can't even be as angry as I want to be about the Nats because they've got some young guys that are playing. This Jake Irvin guy we just called up, pitcher, not a very highly touted prospect, but he's had two really good starts to start his major league career. So things are looking up. Josiah Gray looks like the real deal. So yeah. I don't want to dwell too long on the Nats. I know, that's the homer pick, but Dad, I appreciate you pointing that out. Yeah, we've been talking a little bit. Nats have been beating some teams that I wouldn't have expected them to beat. They kind of put it on the Mets in one series here, and I know that helps my dad, and he's happy about that. So,
yeah, the amount of, especially this weekend in particular, the topsy-turvy series, the ones that the pundits in Vegas certainly wouldn't have gone with at the beginning of the season, to see those teams take on some teams that maybe were, I don't want to say overlooking their opponents, but maybe came in on the back foot and said, okay, hey, we can rest some starters here. We can utilize our bullpen. Maybe we can throw in a flex starter and we'll skate by. It hasn't been the reality. The parity of the league has been very impressive so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned the Mets a moment ago. The Mets are one of those teams that you mentioned. They might have overlooked the Tigers and they got swept. So, baseball is one of those any given day sports, right? But you don't expect in a series like that a team that should be far inferior to a far superior foe in the Mets, to get the sweep on them like that. But I know it helps those NL East fans. I know it helps my dad. Another item for him to be happy about. Braves are playing really good baseball. So that's always a plus for him. And we're going to talk about the Braves in just a minute, but I'm going to pass it your way first.
There we go.
Both of us kind of switched it up. Last week we were going to talk about a couple different series. We took the liberty of the fact that we didn't talk last week and said, I actually want to talk about a different series. So what about you, man? Pirates, Jays, two good teams here, two teams playing really good baseball. The Pirates look like they've got some staying power. I know we were both pretty high on them to start the season. Injuries have kind of been a thing for them, but they've absorbed them, especially the O'Neal Cruz injury. They've absorbed it, and they're still atop that division. Talk to me about this series, man.
Yeah, I was taking a look at this series in particular, and again, this was not something that would have been on my radar 2 weeks ago when we were putting our series previews together. We talked a little bit about Pittsburgh at the beginning of the season, and both of our consensus was, Pittsburgh is going to threaten and flirt around with the National League Central, but their pitching is a big question mark, and certainly their health, they have to stay healthy. And what did we see? But in the first week of the season, the injury to O'Neal Cruz with the ankle injury, and I myself immediately jumped off the bandwagon, so to speak. I didn't think they would be able to do the things that they've done without their arguably best player in the lineup and without arguably one of the better players in baseball and simply a freak of nature. So I didn't have a lot of optimism for Pittsburgh, but over the course of the last 2 weeks, when we were not doing the pod, the Pirates were quietly winning baseball games and doing so in a matter of fashion, which put them not as a contender to flirt around with the National League Central, but as a contender to actually go toe-to-toe with the Brew Crew in the NL Central. And maybe make a little bit more noise, maybe make a little bit more splash, maybe be that new sheriff in town, so you speak, with the Arizona Diamondbacks. They put it all together and had a head-on collision this weekend, a full 3-gamer Friday, Saturday, Sunday series with the Toronto Blue Jays. And we all know about the Blue Jays accolades and their offense and what they can do. And, we, of course, all put them as sort of front runners for the American League title. And so to have those two heavyweights go toe-to-toe in late April, early May was a pretty exciting series to keep an eye on. But ultimately, it didn't turn out that way. The Pirates bats that were so hot,
yeah,
in the course of the 2 weeks when we weren't on, suddenly showed their true colors when they had somebody from the Rosinbaggers pod keeping an eye on them. Because as you know, when we keep an eye on something, it's bound to go the other way. That's how we do here at Rosinbaggers. We curse the shit out of you, and so we planted that baby smack dab on Pittsburgh this weekend. Really impressed with the Toronto pitching going in. They held a hot Pittsburgh offense to just 3 runs in 3 days. The shutout in the first game on Friday turned around. I think they put up 2 on Saturday and then just 1 on Sunday. Sunday was probably the better of the baseball games in terms of a competitiveness standpoint, as Toronto didn't really accelerate away. I think it was like a 4-1 winner or something like that on Sunday. But really overall just impressed with the Toronto pitching. And my biggest takeaway, and I know you're going to talk more about the American League East here in a little bit, because it's actually fascinating and is probably the number one storyline in baseball right now. So I'm glad you're picking it up. If Toronto's pitching can continue to be that good with the offense that they already have, it proves and it really validates us for putting Toronto in that position to be an American League frontrunner, because their pitching really came around and it looks like they're starting to find their groove. A lot of times I think when we take a look here in the first part of April, the first month of the season, a lot of teams are still kind of getting gelled and getting into the familiar roles a little bit. Well, to me, Toronto hit the stride this weekend with that 3-gamer against Pittsburgh, and it was a big series for them. And it was a big series, not only because of the two heavyweights that were colliding, but because the arms race that appears to be happening in the American League East, which again, we'll talk much more in detail about coming up here a little bit later on the show. But it was imperative that Toronto at least keep pace, that they didn't fall off and stub their toe against the Pirates. And they came out and knew they were going to be in a competitive series, knew they were going to be in a series that had some eyeballs on it, and flexed a little bit. I think for the baseball world to say that, yeah, this is the Toronto team that you can expect, that's going to be hitting their stride as they continue to move along throughout the course of the season. Again, really impressed. Biggest question mark I had was, can the arms for Toronto slow down the Pittsburgh bats? They did. They answered all the questions. They checked a lot of the boxes. Toronto looks like a really, really good baseball team. And I'm not saying that Pittsburgh is going to say, here was our shot, we missed it, and now we fall off into irrelevance. I think Pittsburgh will be able to bounce back quite nicely and should, based on the composition of that squad, because their arms, Pittsburgh, to me, is really a lot like Baltimore was a year ago, where there was questions on the arms. But the arms and the most impressive part about Pittsburgh isn't so much the starting rotation, because you can look at that starting rotation and you go, meh, take it or leave it. It's nothing to write home about. Their bullpen has been lights out and phenomenal. Johan Oviedo, moving from what was a trial to be a probable starter in the St. Louis rotation, gets traded away in the Jose deal at the end of last year, and I can't think of his last name for the life of me, but gets traded away right there for a for a starting pitcher from Pittsburgh at the time. They get Oviedo. They've really converted him into a middle relief guy, a guy that can go in and get multiple innings, go distance into the 5th, into the 6th, into the 7th if need be. And he's came across really well. They're shutting people down. So really, you've got to get on Pittsburgh pretty early. And Toronto was able to do that in 2 of the 3 games, build themselves a little bit of a cushion, build themselves a little bit of a lead, and put a little bit of a distance on them. But overall, I think that Toronto and the Blue Jays definitely showed that they are the complete package, and that they are certainly to be a team that's going to threaten here in the next several months.
Yeah, 2 things to add. One observation for Toronto, it's not Alek Manoah either.
Yeah.
Right? That rotation is showing depth. And I know we talked about it last year is, the lineup got longer, the lineup got more dangerous. Were they going to be able to pitch? And Alek Manoah was the all-world starter ace for them last year, and it was, who's going to be that number 2? Who's going to be that number 3? And Gausman had a fine year last year. But they are deeper this year on that rotation, and if Manoah figures it out, look out in a 7-game series, especially if Manoah starts pitching the way we know he can pitch. They're 4 deep, and who beats them if they can pitch? Mm-hmm. Who beats them in a 7-game series with that offense? I struggle to think anybody outside of their own division. Really, you've got the Rays in that division that are hot as fish grease, and I expect them to kind of stay the course and be there at the end, and they've got a long lineup too. But man, if they can pitch, if Manoah can figure it out, and these guys that are pitching well early this year, I mean, Gausman is basically neck and neck with Garrett Cole,
yeah,
right? And who would have that, right? It's Ohtani, and then it's Cole and Gausman are basically 2 and 2A in the AL right now, as far as a month into the season. And who would have thought that coming into the season? And I only really know this because he's on my fantasy team. So there's a plug for my fantasy team.
There you go.
Gausman's been a revelation for our team. My brother and I run it together. But, the AL East is really tough. And if they can pitch with that lineup, it's going to be tough to beat them. And it's not Manoah. That's the craziest part for me through a month of the season. Manoah is scuffling.
Mm-hmm.
If they get him, they might go on one of those runs like the Rays had early in the season, might win 15 out of 18, and suddenly you've got a race at the top. It's the Rays are kind of staying the course and staying pace in front of people, but the Jays definitely have that immediate spurt potential if they can get Manoah pitching the way they know that we all know he can pitch. Question for you though on the Pirates.
Mm-hmm.
So we have seen them in the past do both stay and buy at the deadline when they're near or at the top of the division. We've seen them make some trades in the past for a guy like a Jason Bay and make a move here and there, but we've also seen them years when they've been maybe a couple games behind the Cardinals or a couple games behind the Brewers or Cubs or whoever's at the top of the division at the time, and just kind of stay the course and then fade toward the end of the season. Do you think this Pirates team, with what we've seen in terms of a shift, right, in the way they're treating young players now, these major league front offices and locking them up early, calling them up earlier than usual, do we see teams open windows farther now? Do you see the Pirates, right, specifically, mm-hmm. if they continue to be at or contending at the top of this division, are they going to be buyers at the deadline?
I think they'll buy, but I don't think it'll be for the big whale that's out in the ocean, if you will. The big names that are gonna draw a lot of the interest. But I could see Pittsburgh making moves very similar to what Arizona did in the winter meetings, where they didn't splash. They flew under the radar. They improved a couple positions, not substantially, but really rounded out the team. And I only say that because when you take a look at the composition of the roster already, there's not a lot of gaping holes in it, and there's
Right.
a lot of role players that are really coming into form. I mean, look at the resurgence of Connor Joe, for example, from Colorado, and he comes in and he's just been steady Eddie for him in terms of his production at the plate, and then you only add things when it comes to his speed on the base paths, and the veteran leadership that Andrew McCutchen brings with you when you insert him into the 9 in your starting lineup every day. That is, you can't put a price tag on that, and you can't put that on the bench either. We all know Reynolds is world class in terms of what he can do, and he is for the life of me one of those players that continues to fly under the radar, not only in Major League Baseball but in fantasy baseball as well. I mean, you take a look at the amount of leagues he's available in, and
it's crazy.
And it blows your mind, because the guy's probably going to be a high 300 hitter this year, and then tack on double-digit home runs as well. And the rest of their guys, they're young. They're young dudes, Brian Hayes and Jack Swinsky and Marcano. And then you're going to add O'Neal Cruz back to the lineup. And I think that's another important piece you can remember. And you take a look at, okay, where's the gaps in Pittsburgh's lineup right now? Where's the gaps in the bats? And it's like, all right, well, that shortstop position could use a little work. Oh, wait, they've got a shortstop that's sitting on the shelf that's just waiting to get healthy. Once he comes back into that lineup, they're going to be right there. The one thing, I think catcher, I think a solid number 2 backstop that's maybe splitting time with another organization could potentially rise to the crop and be a mainstay. I would say that's probably where their biggest gap is at. As long as Carlos Santana stays hot, I don't think you take that bat out of the lineup at the first base position if he's going to continue to produce for you. So I think the catcher spot, and then maybe you can go get yourself a couple arms. And I'm not saying insert these arms into the pitching rotation right away, but add them and have them in the arsenal if you need, because as you move along and are going to be attempting to make a deep run at this thing, or a run at the playoffs in general, you're going to need arms. You're going to have days where you're just going to have to sit one of your guys out of the rotation for a minute, bring in a 6 starter that's going to be able to get you 5 to be able to get to your bullpen, which has been, again, knock on wood for Pittsburgh's sake, lights out to the point of this season. But I think you need to add a couple more arms in the kitchen, especially when you're talking in terms of when the rosters expand, to be able to bring those guys into the system and into the show. Pittsburgh doesn't make splash moves at the deadline, but I can see them in contention, putting together pieces. And I'll tell you this about Pittsburgh: I don't see them selling. Why would you put any of these pieces out onto the free agency market? There's no waters to test here. There's no reason to dip your toes and see who bites and to try to make a lot of money here. Pittsburgh's in a position right now, based on the way things have gone in the Central, where they can be a front runner and can only better themselves towards the deadline. But I don't think they do it by getting the star. I don't think they do it by trying to lasso the moon. I think they do it with a lot of subtle, simple, nice additions that'll help round out the roster.
Yeah, that last point you made about pitching, I think that's where I see a potential move for them at the deadline. And it's not, you're not going to go out and get a Ohtani if he ends up available, right? You're going to get a guy who's a spot start, long reliever, middle reliever. Maybe you get a guy who could slot in the middle of the rotation if you really feel like there's an opportunity to upgrade. But, I agree. There won't be sellers.
No.
At the deadline.
No reason to.
I don't see any reason to, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. All right. So I want to talk about another AL East team playing an NL East team, another interleague play series here, Baltimore and Atlanta. And last week I was looking at the Cubs series, and I thought, okay, competitive, but this series just turned into the series I had to talk about. It was hyper competitive. Every game decided by a couple runs at most, competitive throughout. The last game of the series ended up going 11 innings with some unbelievable defense and extra innings. Ronald Acuna, about his bat. You know about his speed on the base paths. He steals a lot of bases. Probably going to be a 40-40 guy eventually. Damn near a 40-40 guy during his 20, I think it was 2020 or 2019 season. He uncorks a fucking rail shot in extra innings to cut down a run and keep the game alive for Atlanta when Baltimore was threatening to open up a big inning in extra innings, and they ended up getting out of the inning without even giving up a single run. After that, Baltimore makes its own, big defensive play. It was unbelievable throughout, and that last game of the series really captured it for me. It tells me a few things. It tells me that the excitement of baseball is back. The way this series was played, as competitive as it was, and the games, even the extra inning game only went, I think it was like 2 hours and 42 minutes or something. It was unbelievable how quick the game moved. The action was nonstop, but it also tells me that the Orioles are here to stay. When you compete with the Braves and you play a 3-game series with them that is that competitive and comes down to that level of play in extra innings in the 3rd game of the series, Baltimore is here to stay, and Atlanta's the real deal because they got production from everywhere. They got pitching, they got bullpen. The bullpen was really solid. AJ Minter's been a little unsteady this year, but he was better in this series. And that lineup is just plain scary. And for Baltimore to navigate that lineup the way that they did with their pitching staff, it was such a great series to watch. Two teams that I fully expect will be in the playoffs this year. And the Braves, obviously, they're almost a shoe-in done deal pending, disaster in terms of health. But Baltimore, I think, is a playoff team this year. And I think this weekend they put their stamp on I mentioned the new sheriff in town. I think this was Baltimore saying, hey, we're here. We're playing a juggernaut. We're playing one of the league favorites. We're playing a World Series favorite. We're playing the NL favorite, and we're playing them tough. So this was a great series. It told me a lot about both teams. And there was so much star power on display. Adley Rutschman, for those of you that don't know, I don't know what cave you've been living in for the last 18 months, but this guy is the future of the catching position. There's him, there's Sean Murphy, another young guy, but Adley Rutschman, the way he manages the pitching staff, he manages it like he's a 10-year vet. On top of that, he hits 3rd, 4th in their lineup. 2, 3, 4. I think they move him around a little bit depending on matchups, but he's a key cog in their lineup, and he manages that pitching staff expertly. I mentioned the fact that they were able to kind of keep this Braves lineup at bay for a good, the majority of this series. That last game was a 2-1 final. Adley's just so good behind the dish. He is the future of the catching position.
For sure. A couple things about this series. And again, this is where I'll continually, and I might have to do this throughout the course of the entire season, backtrack on my own comments and my own rantings and ravings about Major League Baseball and Rob Manfred. When they came out with the concept of the balanced schedule and less divisional games and more interleague play and more opportunities to see the stars in ballparks where they might not normally be in a regular 4-year rotation, you get matchups like this where you get a pit and you get to see a team like Baltimore and a true test, a measuring stick against one of the arguable front runners for the National League. And it is great for baseball, but I think more so it's great for these clubhouses and it's great for these baseball teams to have a playoff caliber game in the middle of April. You wouldn't get that. But Baltimore, when going toe to toe with a front runner, a National League contender, immediately that entire clubhouse says, we've got a 3-game series that we can get up for. It's not your traditional, we're going to see the Red Sox 18 times this year. So let's just, and
a dozen of them are in April.
Right. Pack this one in April. You didn't have that. There's more of a sense of urgency in my mind with each and every series because the limited time that you get to see these teams, and especially with these interleague series, is only once. it's created a really fun environment, not only for the fans, but for the players themselves. So you had that measuring stick. I'll be brief on Baltimore again, because I know we're going to harp on the American League East here in a little bit, but Baltimore, by far, even more so than Boston, Baltimore has surprised me in the American League East, only because I didn't like what they did, and I thought maybe they missed a window of opportunity to take advantage of, and they've proven me wrong, and the team has come together and really formed out nicely. The pitching has picked up exactly where it left off, but I wanted to spend more time talking a little bit about that one point that you made about the Atlanta Braves, and maybe, if you will, the kink in the armor, so to speak. The one spot where you got your elbow pads and your wrist pads and your shin guards and everything. There's that one spot where the ball always seems to find you on a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. It's the bullpen, right? And there is certainly some concerns with the Atlanta bullpen, but I want to flip it, and I want to ask you, how much of the Atlanta bullpen issues are simply based on the fact that for the majority of the games, the bullpen really isn't needed because the rotation is that strong?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of factors. I think that's a really good one, right? Because you're not in high pressure situations late when you've got a lineup as good as you've got and a rotation that has, since a little bit of a shaky start from a few guys early in the season, they've really kind of, one, they've gotten healthy in the rotation, and two, they've really kind of rounded into shape in the rotation. So you're ahead by a lot of runs in a lot of these games. And I can speak as I closed my freshman year at college. I closed, and it is hard to come into a game when you've got a 4 or 5 run lead as somebody out of the bullpen and really juice yourself up.
For sure.
Because you've got such a small window that things can kind of cave in really quickly. So it's partially that, the fact that the rotation's been so good and the lineup is so good. The other thing, I don't think people realize how much they missed Raisel Iglesias. The fact that they had
AJ Kenley Jansen.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just not Kenley, right? I think that AJ Minter is one of the elite guys in the 7th, 8th inning. Remember the guy for the damn Indians, and I cannot remember his name. It's eluding me now. Big lefty, but he was so good in the 7th and 8th inning. He led the league in holds 5 years in a row, and then they tried him as closer, and he floundered. Then they put him back in this position in the 7th and 8th inning. Sean something, but anyway, I think that's what AJ Minter is. And I think now that Iglesias is back healthy, they can put Minter back in that situation where he is the high pressure, high, intensity situations where he can just get a hold, right? And get the ball to Raisel Iglesias, because now they've got their closer back. I think things align better in the bullpen. So I think that those two factors combined, I think we're going to see the Braves be a little bit better out of the bullpen as we get into the dog days of summer, because you're probably going to see maybe some tighter games, these long stretches, and the days are hotter, and, all that fun stuff. Did you find his name?
Nope, I have not found his name.
I cannot. I'm gonna Google it while you're talking about your preview series here in just a moment, because he played for the Red Sox, he played for the Indians, and I cannot remember his name. He was so dominant in that 7th, 8th inning role. They used to bring him in too. They'd bring him in for 6, 7 outs at sometimes to get the ball to the closer.
Shaw, was it?
No.
Okay.
Shaw. I'm gonna set up this week 7 preview, and I'm gonna do some Google homework, because it's irritating me that I can't think of his damn name.
We're gonna find it. We're gonna find it on Google.
All right. So let's talk about series previews here. So Stove's previewing the Braves and Jays, and we're talking about two teams at or near the top of their divisions. Big matchup there. Great lineups. Great pitching, especially with the Jays pitching being, a little better, I think, right now at this stage of the season than we might have expected. So this should be a really good matchup on the East Coast between an AL East and an NL East, another interleague series here.
Yeah, it's one from the Vegas perspective. You know, I look at that. I don't know what I would want to do on like the over-under lines for that series because it's two explosive offenses. But like we just got done talking about, the thing that has been most impressive about these two teams has been the pitching. So it's certainly one that will be very interesting to keep an eye on. This weekend.
Yeah, this is a measuring stick series again. And if, you know, when you're the Braves, when you're kind of the NL favorite, I think you're going to get everybody's best punch anyway. And then that best punch happens to be a pretty damn good punch from the Jays. So this should be a pretty good series.
For sure.
Ty, talk to me a little bit about that creative picture you got, bud.
Look at that. You know, I don't do anything traditional here on the Rosinbaggers podcast. So when I Google search graphics for my series preview and I type in Guardians and Angels, and I don't realize that the two go together pretty handy. And there's a big faith community on Google that has like the first 1,000 images are of like St. Michael and Michelangelo and all these guardian angels. And I'm like, I don't even know where I'm going to find this graphic. So here you go. Here's a picture of an angel watching over me. And they're going to need to watch over Cleveland here in this series because the Angels in the outfield are starting to flap their wings a little bit and doing things that I thought that they would do last year and didn't. The team's playing good baseball right now, and they're toe-to-toe with the Texas Rangers in terms of the American League West race. Houston, oddly enough, has fallen and struggled a little bit here out of the gates in early August. Only one game over the 500 mark, and Anaheim's taking advantage of that. And quite frankly, Anaheim's taking advantage of that based on two players with Shohei and Mike Trout, and they're absolutely raking right now. We could do an entire podcast and just focus on all of the accomplishments that Shohei Ohtani does every single time that he steps in the batter's box or onto the pitcher's mound, because he's quite literally, every time I watch him, breaking a record or setting
some sort of historical mark
that hasn't ever been done before. He is that good. He broke Bambino the other day. He passed Bambino in terms of the dual position player in what he's been able to accomplish with his accolades. And it's very impressive. And Anaheim's playing good baseball. Again, don't be fooled. It is a lot of Shohei. It is a lot of Trout, but they're also getting production from, you know, the Renfros and the Rondones are coming around. It's a good baseball team right now that's going up against who we all thought, I think, was going to be a front runner and maybe even have the potential to run away with the division in the American League Central. And the American League Central,
oh my God,
has been a dumpster fire of really, really bad baseball. And I don't know at this point if there is a more depressing story than the American League Central right now for the major leagues. Cleveland, mind you, is not only not winning the division, they're not first, and they're not even second. That title belongs to, of all things, the Detroit Tigers, because they're sweeping teams. They swept a team this weekend in the Mets. They took 2 of 3 from the St. Louis the St. Louis Cardinals, who are flocking with one wing right now. Listen, Cleveland is in a put up, shut up scenario right now. And I know that it's May, and I know I hate pressing the panic button. But if they're going to be a player in the American League in general, I want to see a little something more of them. They could drop easily 3 games to Anaheim, and nobody would be shocked by that. And the other thing is, nobody would be shocked if Cleveland drops 3 games to Anaheim and then turns away and ends up winning this division by 20 games because Minnesota falters at some point. I don't think the division is necessarily in any position of peril for Cleveland, but from where they were last year and the kind of the push that they made in the postseason before they were outed, leaves you to wonder, where's the magic? And a big reason, and I'll throw Cleveland, you know, I understand injuries are a part of the game, and I understand that maybe your preseason expectations may have been a little lofty based on the 26 guys that you have on the roster, and when one of those guys goes down, aka Tristan McKenzie, boy, they're missing him in that rotation because they're getting shelled right now, and Zach Plesac has not been nowhere near his form. I think he got rocked for 6.5 the other day in terms of his ERA. So the pitching isn't there. The rotation has been very weak, and Cleveland's really starting to understand that Jose Ramirez isn't going to do it on his own. And not only can he not do it on his own, he's also really cold. So it's a situation right now in Cleveland where they got to start playing a little bit better baseball. They've got an opportunity to mix things up in the West a little bit if they can take 2 or 3 from Anaheim. But right now, I've just been so impressed with the way that the Angels have come around. Their pitching has been solid. It's not great. It's not world beating, but it's solid. You know, what was the main thing that we were almost laughing about with Anaheim? Look at the first 2 weeks of the season, right? Shohei was doing his thing. Trout was doing his thing. Anaheim was losing by 11 runs. And it's like, how the hell?
Trout went 5 for 6 with a couple doubles and a homer. Shohei went 3 for 4 with a couple dingers, and they lost 17-6.
But they're starting to overcome some of that early issues, and now they're getting production from other people in the lineup. They're getting their innings out of the rotation that they need. And their bullpen is doing a serviceable enough job to keep them in the hunt. It's a good Anaheim baseball team right now.
Yes, it is.
Is it a playoff baseball team right now? I kind of want to see them against a team that went to the playoffs a year ago, and see this early May showdown between the Guardians and the Angels, not to be confused with the Guardian Angels from heaven.
Yeah,
but
I think that last
Guardians are going to need a little blessing.
Yeah, for sure. I think that last point you made, right? I'm not ready to buy yet because of history. Mm-hmm. This is a good measuring stick for the Angels against a team that made the playoffs last year, a team that came into the season with pretty good, a good level of expectation, with the roster comp and Tito, of course, and just what they did last year.
In a winnable division.
In a very winnable division. And it's still very winnable, right?
Right, but they should be 12 up. They should.
You know? For sure. As bad as this division is, they should be. It's frustrating. But, I look at – we mentioned the whole Alek Manoah thing with the Blue Jays, and they've been getting good pitching from everybody else. They lost McKenzie, which, right?
It's huge.
Cy Young contender for sure, your best young pitcher. Maybe your best pitcher on the roster, but your steady veteran guy in Shane Bieber, who had a good start yesterday, hasn't been great so far this year. And again, another plug, he's on my fantasy team, so I know how shaky he's been in some of his starts. Not getting the swings and misses that Bieber usually gets, not getting the long distance quality starts that you usually get from him. And I think that has something to do with you mentioned the bullpen's been keeping them afloat. We see this, though, with bullpens. You get these gut punches and gut punches and gut punches. It's only so long before your bullpen starts to fall apart because they're overworked, they're tired, and you get into these hotter days in the summer. We're in May. We're getting close to June, July, August when we're really talking about the hot dog days of summer. You can't just keep leaning on that bullpen the way they've been doing. And it's a matter of Bieber's got to step up and be that guy, but they need somebody. Cal Quantrill, it's got to be Plesac. Somebody's got to be that guy that lengthens that rotation and takes some pressure off that bullpen, a la the Blue Jays, right? We've seen that from them while their ace is sputtering. They've been great 3 through 4. Even 5 has been really good at times. We haven't gotten that from Cleveland, and I think that's why they've been scuffling as much as they have. What are they? They're 17-20 right now, 3 under.
3 under.
And they're a game and a half out of their two and a half out of their division. So not at all something for them to panic about, as you said, but they should be in a much better position.
guys that have been solid, right? And you mentioned Cal Quantrill, and I couldn't think of his name when I talked about Zach Plesac too. Guys that typically get you 6, and your expectation is, yeah, they might get knocked around a little bit, maybe give up 4 or 5 runs, but our offense is going to be able to overcome that. And plus, they're going to take us deep into the game and get our bullpen involved. Quantrill has been more underwhelming, even more so than Zach Plesac, but they both need to step up their game for that rotation if they're going to have and make a run at this. Because again, when you take a look at the, I look at the farm system in Cleveland, and especially when it comes to pitching arms, there's not a lot in the cupboard that they can bring up and try to replace and bring a young guy into the fold and into the system and get him up to speed. They don't have that top pitching prospect that a couple of the other clubs may be able to turn to here in the mid part of May, early June to add another arm into that rotation. Cleveland is really reliant on the middle of their rotation stepping up and being big players. And, even more so for your fantasy team, you're hoping for just 1 week where you don't have to sit there and look at the stat line and go, baby, oh no. For Bieber.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done. Well done. On that note, let's shift gears to my series here. And I'm highlighting this series for the juxtaposition.
I like it.
So, Mariners, Tigers, and what I mean when I say juxtaposition is the Mariners are 18-19 right now, and the Tigers are 17-19 right now. And I don't know that we've ever had 2 teams with similar records that feel like they are 180 degrees from where we expected each of them to be.
Yep.
Right? I had, honestly, the Tigers, I had them losing like 100, 105 games. I said they were going to struggle to win 55. They might blow by that number, honestly, and they've been playing pretty good baseball. And I actually have to say I saw on somebody shared the video to me. Somebody mentioned the fact that they had played like the AL or the NL East for the 16 of their first like 22 games of the season, and they had played pretty decent baseball. And they expected them to go on a run, and they have since then, right? So they've been playing pretty good baseball, and the Mariners have just been not the Mariners that we saw in 2022, right? They're not getting starting pitching. Their starting pitching's been at best meh. Julio Rodriguez is batting at the Mendoza line right now, not getting the power we expect from him and not getting the excitement on the base paths because he's not on the base paths. Not getting the same production out of Cal Rowley, not getting the same production out of several people in that lineup, with the exception of Jared Kelenic, who's been an underwhelming performer in years past, who's been having a career year so far, but they can't pair anything together. And they're not on the base paths creating issues. They're not stringing hits together. They don't get quality starts out of their starters, and their bullpen's been shaky at best. And it all comes together to say they're probably right now 6 or 7 wins behind where I would have expected them to be. And on the opposite side, the Tigers are playing they're punching above their weight. This is not a great roster in terms of composition for a contender. This is a really good prospect-laden roster that is set for 2025. Yet right now they're 17-19 and they're in second place in their division. You mentioned it a moment ago.
Yeah.
They just activated Casey Mize, and that's some relief for them. I fully expect Tarek Skubal is going to see some time on the mound this year. Not much, but a little. They're going to see him on the mound. We're looking at a team that maybe we're going to be talking about them next year as the Orioles, right? The 2022 Orioles. This year we're talking about, the Pirates and the Diamondbacks as being those teams. Maybe next year it's the Tigers. And maybe we should be paying attention to them this year to know that next year that might be them, because they've got a really strong farm system. They've got prospects across the board, both on offense, defense, and pitching. They've got guys in that farm system that I would have expected 2025, but maybe we're looking at 2024. The Detroit Tigers are going to make some noise in an AL Central that, quite frankly, if it doesn't get better, this year, I don't know it's going to get better next year.
Who's to say right now for Detroit's perspective? Who's to say they can't make a run at this weak division as is? Right. I mean, it is in shambles right now, and the Casey Mize addition is huge. Now, Casey's going to have to prove a lot because not only is Casey going to have to prove to me that Casey Mize can come back from injury and be when he comes back from injury, Casey Mize has to be better than the Casey Mize that went out prior to his injury. He did not have that Mackenzie Gore style splash when he came into the league. Now, a lot of that, I'll say it, Detroit needed an arm and probably rushed the development of Casey through the minor league system. I will concur with that, and I'll agree with that, and I'll give you a little bit of grace. But he has to come back and be a strong arm in this rotation. If we're talking about Detroit potentially making a run at the American League Central, which based on the rest of the teams in the American League Central is actually not that far-fetched of an idea.
You're not crazy for saying that.
No. The other thing, and I'll point out a couple big key pieces for Detroit, because you mentioned it's time to start paying attention to Detroit. I've kind of paid attention to Detroit a little bit over the course of the last 2 weeks, and just keeping an eye on maybe a team that may come out and be a sneaky surprise. One will start on the offense. Javi Baez has found something. I don't know what.
I think the benching woke him up, man.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it woke him up.
That's a real possibility. And
sometimes you just got to know the button to push, and maybe that was the button.
I'm hoping that's going to be the same thing with Contreras over in St. Louis, but more on that in a little bit too. Javi Baez has found something, and his career has resurged, and it very well could have been you're going to be the next Robbie Cano. You're going to get benched and you're going to go from team to team to team, and somebody thinks they can get a line on you and you don't produce, and then you go back into the free agency pool. And that was really kind of where I had destined Javi Baez, his career, to be on track for.
It felt like that, didn't it?
Until he flexed a little bit, and he's found it. And
he's back making noise on the base paths
and hitting, and he's not in the bottom of the order. He's doing it at the top of the order for Detroit. It's been impressive. A couple other names to pass along, and some of the young pieces that they get to work on and work with. We talked a little bit about the sheer power that Torkelson brings into the lineup. Well, he's got some assists with Riley Green hitting in front of him, Akil Baddoo hitting behind him. A clutch guy that we don't talk about near enough. But when I watch the Tigers, I always see him extend the at-bats and have the starting pitchers go through and maybe throw a couple different pitches in their arsenal and give your guys behind you a couple extra different looks. Matt Vierling's at-bats are incredible. In terms of the length he goes, and then, he'll wear you down. He'll get, into these deep 9-10 pitch ABs, and then he'll piss you off by knocking a little bloop single out into right field. And just keeping the inning alive. And he's hitting at the bottom of the order. And then you flip back to the top half and you get Baez, Green, and Torkelson again. I mean, and so Detroit has that working for him. You talked about Garrett Cole. You talked about Gausman, kind of front runners right now in the American League in terms of who could potentially win a Cy Young. And I'm going to throw one more name out you. Eduardo Rodriguez has been insane. His last
I owe him an apology for not mentioning his name, but he's been electric.
His last 6 starts, he's only allowed 2 runs, a 1.57 ERA in 6 consecutive starts. That is Sandy Alcantara numbers over in Miami for Detroit. Another one of those really, really, really good pitchers who plays on a team that maybe you don't notice him near enough, and we sure as hell don't talk about him enough because he's based on the team he plays for. I think that is Eduardo Rodriguez. I've been more than impressed and more than pissed off at myself for not jumping on the boat midway through that start stretch, because about the third he was still available in our leagues, and I was thinking, he's on the Tigers, they're gonna give up a lot of runs, it's not gonna be good, he's gonna get no run support. So I passed on Rodriguez, and now my team is suffering because of it. So Eduardo Rodriguez, hats off to you. What an incredible start. Maybe in terms of the first month of the season, the top story in terms of where the hell did you come from? Welcome to the show. Eduardo Rodriguez deserves full credit. 1 point on Seattle I'll make, and you mentioned Julio Rodriguez, and this is not a me putting on a tinfoil hat and being a conspiracy theorist and shouting out things that get me fired from a news network, and then I go start my own network on Twitter. This is topical. Julio Rodriguez, when I watch his at-bats, something about it weirds me out a little bit. That strike zone for Rodriguez expands.
I've seen a couple, and I
don't know. Are you also noticing? Because I know you also like the Mariners, and so there's probably times where you get to watch it. I'm seeing shit that's a foot outside that's called on Rodriguez in at bats where he has runners in scoring position and can make an impact. And I don't know if that's well, you're supposed to be this big major league all-star, go hit it. But typically it's the other way around. You're the major league all-star.
Right. Usually you get
the benefit of the doubt. Julio, it's been the exact opposite. And I noticed it a little bit last year. And even at the point where the Mariners broadcast crew was bitching a little bit about it. But facts don't lie, and the report card doesn't lie. And he has gone down on strikes with the upside down K more times on a ball that's a foot outside of the strike zone than he's actually gone down on strikes when it's a strike.
Yeah.
And that's, again, I'm not gonna sit here and make excuses for you being one game under 500. But I am saying that's got to be extremely frustrating from the Mariners fan base to have to watch that.
Yeah, for sure. When it's a guy you're relying on to be able to come through in those situations too. And I always said it to umps, right? As a pitcher or a hitter, just don't take the at bat away, right? Mm-hmm. And a call like that, when it's that bad, can really take the at bat away. Not to mention the fact that he's getting punched on a lot of these, these calls that are just ridiculous. I don't know if it's a product of across all of Major League Baseball, umpires behind the plate. They're awful. They're awful. I think we have more awareness of it maybe because it's in our face so much and in all the TikToks and everything that get shared all the time that illustrate these things. But it is frustrating, I'm sure, for him to have to deal with a strike zone that it feels like it's inconsistent too. That was always a big thing for me as a hitter or a pitcher. I can adjust to your strike zone,
right,
if it's consistent. Mm-hmm. If you're calling it on the black, it's a ball, it better be a ball every time or a strike every time. If you're giving me an inch or two off the plate, or if you're giving the pitcher an inch or two off the plate, it better be an inch or two off the plate every time, not 1 inch this time, 6 inches next time. It can't be that way. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you. It is odd. And I don't know, did he do something to piss an umpire off and it's just gotten through the league? Because I know Allen Iverson was a guy during his time who referees, and Donahue pointed this out in his documentary, but referees would once in a while, they'd say, well, we're going to start calling carries on Allen Iverson for the next week or two. So I don't know. It's weird. It's not good. It's not good because that's one of your faces of the league. And I would think that the league would, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Mm-hmm. Let's stop fucking doing that because he is on the cover of Topps Series 1 this year and he's on TV all the fucking time doing the commercials. Let's take that down a notch. But yeah, no, I've seen it. I haven't seen as many Mariners games as I probably would have expected to watch this year. I think it's because they've been not in a lot of competitive games, and they've not been playing great baseball. I've been kind of tuning into other games.
And they play on the West Coast and start at midnight too.
Fucking late at night. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, no, that and so the calls against Rodriguez has been concerning, and then you gotta really, from a Mariners perspective, be concerned and maybe start to be typing in some potential alternative options. Ty France is cold. Ty France was the star last year for the Mariners. I mean, as much as Julio Rodriguez did incredible things, Ty France was the star of that franchise, and Ty France has been non-existent. That to me 100%. Is more of a concern than the Julio calls. You got to find a way to get that bat back doing what it does. Otherwise, it's going to be it could be a long season for Seattle.
Absolutely.
There's no getting around it. I think we had certainly high expectations based on where they finished a year ago and what they brought in. It could be a very long and painful at times season for that fan base to have to endure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gotta find it.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's get to the most important part of the episode, and let's get to our folds of honor. Salute to service. All right, brought to you by Folds of Honor. This is our Salute to Service segment. In this segment, every episode we dedicate to a fallen service member. This week's episode goes out to Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Paul K. Voss, who died January 27, 2020, serving during Operation Freedom Sentinel. He was 46 at the time of his death. He was from Yigo, Guam, died January 27th, 2020, when his Bombardier E-11A crashed in Ghazni Province, Afghanistan. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Paul K. Voss, we have the watch. All right, let's find a little energy for the room. Let's talk about some stocks you might want to either buy or sell or keep an eye on, maybe down the road. We call it our Rosinbaggers Investments segment. I know we mentioned it before, but I could not imagine on Wall Street at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, whatever time they ring the bell in the morning, to listen to that bell go on for that long. That's literally the soundbite. That's how long the bell goes off in the morning. It's unbelievable. And it's an obnoxious bell too. But
it's obnoxious. It would be in the morning after 6 or 7 6 or 7 lattes, right? You're kind of walking in, you got a little bit of a headache, and you bang, 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 bang. Okay. We are good to go. Let's do this.
Absolutely. But it tells everybody what we're talking about. So Stove wanted to highlight
Vegas.
Yeah.
They're 8-30.
I know.
What do you want to do with the Oakland/Vegas stock?
Yeah.
Are you buying the Oakland stock here? Because of Brent Rooker has been phenomenal and is the only player on that team worth mentioning. What are you buying here? Your run differential is minus 142. Dude,
they are on they might break the record for a season by the All-Star break. Run differential. Honestly, they are so bad.
It's not good.
From top to bottom in that lineup, that rotation, that bullpen. You remember Yuris Familia? There's about 5 people on the planet that probably remember Yuris Familia.
I'm a little familiar with Yuris Familia.
His little bit of a run with the Mets where his name was fun to say, but he blew a lot of saves. he's doing a lot of that with the A's as well. Yeah, you mentioned Brent Rooker. It's tough to find anybody beyond that. They traded away the last bastion of hope, really, for them with the Sean Murphy trade.
Yeah.
The Braves keep capitalizing on these Oakland A's trade with Olsen and Sean Murphy, two people that are central cogs to their lineup. 8-30. Are they going to win 40 games this year?
Nope.
That's
unbelievable. I want Major League Baseball to make a little shift, mid-season switcheroo, and change the rules up a little bit and go full on Premier League here. Give me the best AAA team and throw them in the American League.
Give me the Durham Bulls or something.
See if they can contend. See if they can fight a little bit, because it's got to be better than watching Oakland.
It has to be
right now.
It has to be.
This
isn't even a AAA roster. They have one major leaguer. They have one fringe major leaguer, and a bunch of fucking high A and low A ball players.
Mm-hmm.
It is unbelievable, and I feel bad for these players. Right? I say all of that, but I want to soften that just a touch, because these guys don't belong in the major leagues. They are in the major leagues because of how inept this organization is, how intentionally inept this organization is.
Bingo.
So that they could chase away a fan base and move the team to the cash cow that is Las Vegas. I've said it 100 times. It's never going to happen, but I'm going to say it again. Major League Baseball should have taken this team away from the Millers years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago, it should have been taken away. This year, 100%. If you have the money to go purchase prime real estate in Las Vegas before even having a city grant in place, you're not hurting for money to put talent on the field in Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
It is embarrassing for the game of baseball.
And you say chased away the fan base, and I'll backtrack on that a little bit, because I feel for the Oakland fan base, having gone through a similar situation in the NFL with the St. Louis Rams when the Crawford organization decided to uproot St. Louis, and it was a very similar story in the fact that the fan support never stopped, even despite all of the rumors and basic knowledge. I think we all realized a year ago that Oakland wasn't going to be staying in Oakland, that this team was pulling a scene out of Major League, and only this time the bad guys were going to win. And we all kind of knew that was going to happen, and Oakland wasn't going to be a forever home. But they never stopped trying to make that a reality. They had the support to build a new park. From the voters and from the people, from the city and fan base. The fan base, even despite being 8-30, it is poor attendance, but it is not as if everybody's just simply said, well, screw it, we're moving, what the hell. They still put butts in the seat, and they still go out and support this franchise, and even maybe more so now, realizing that this is going to be their last chance to get any sort of grasp of history. But it's a lot. It's a horrible love story just gone bad, and I feel less for the players, and again, through no fault of their own. They were put on this roster to fulfill this mission, and they fulfilled it admirably, and that's the thing. But I feel really sympathetic towards this fan base that probably does deserve another shot at a Major League Baseball franchise in a brand new ballpark, in an opportunity where it could be successful, and with an ownership group that doesn't plan to damn it from the word go. That to me is, again, we talk a lot about the good, positive, awesome things that this game provides. This is part of the ugly side. This is part of the business side. And this is a part of, it ain't guys that are suiting up and putting on a baseball jersey and cleats and go out and they're doing amazing things. These are the guys that are putting on the suits and the ties that are going out there and screwing everybody. And sometimes those guys, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, they're a part of baseball as well. And this has been ugly from the start. But if you have any Oakland stock left, you're not going to get anything from it. It has gone dry. It is at zero, but go ahead and have a nice little bonfire outside in your backyard. Burning the Oakland stock, because it's not worth anything anymore. It's done.
Yep, for sure. It's frustrating though for a once proud one of the richest history. It's so frustrating.
Raleigh and Ricky Henderson, Tony La Russa, Mark McGuire, Jose Canseco, Catfish Hunter. The names and the history will only be now remembered in Cooperstown.
Yep, absolutely. All right. I think I'm gonna save yours for last.
You want to save that? Okay, we'll save that.
I think so. Okay. I think so, because I think we've got the passion play coming. So I'm gonna get my my spiel out of the way here. So
sure.
You see the map. You see the 4 teams that are circled. Those 4 teams reside in the American League East. And let's talk about
that one in Canada.
That's true. That's true. They're not on the East Coast of the United States. There is one in Canada that I missed. I meant to circle it, but I screwed it up.
That's why I'm here. I call it.
Yeah. Sorry, Canada. But let's talk about the American League East, because the Yankees have now won their last 3 after, 5 of their last 6 since falling below 500. The Rays are 29-9. They still have not hit double digits in losses. The Orioles are 24-13, 11 games over 500. The Red Sox are 6 games over 500 at 22-12, and the Blue Jays, who we've talked about already on this episode of this podcast, are 21-16, 5 games over 500. So the worst team in the American League East, the basement of the American League East, is 4 games over 500.
Insane.
To put that in perspective, there are 1 and 2 other divisions that they would be in first place, and they are in last place. They would be tied in the National League Central, but they would be in first place, clear by a couple of games in the AL Central, and they would be tied for first place in the NL Central, and they sit in 5th place in their own division, and that's the New York Yankees. Now, I picked the New York Yankees to take a step back and finish 4th in the division. I didn't expect everybody else to just blow past them and put them in the basement at 21-17. However, that's been the state of affairs in the American League East this year. We've talked about the Rays, the historic start they got out to, setting records that hadn't been touched since the 1800s, almost set the all-time record, for games out the gate and best record for the first 2 weeks and yada, yada. And the home run streak, right? They hit home runs in 17 straight. They almost broke that record. I don't know how much more we can say about the Rays with all the arms they roll out. We've talked about that a bunch, but this division, in a time when we see the defending World Series champions struggling out the gate, this division is unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that it's going to fade, because the Yankees, and I'll admit it right now, the Yankees have proven to me that they have enough pitching to win games that they won last year that I thought that they would lose this year. They've survived the Aaron Judge injury. Aaron Judge is back now in that lineup, the most important piece on that team. They're, $17 trillion all-star outfielder who set the American League record for home runs last year. They survived his injury and continued to play decent ball. They did fall below 500 while he was out, but they didn't crater while he was out. And now that he's back, they're on a little bit of a run back. Like I said, 4 games over 500. We might see, if this division continues to play out the way it plays out. Now they're going to play each other and beat each other up a little bit, but we might see multiple 82-plus win teams miss the playoffs in this division. multiple above 500 teams in this division alone miss the playoffs.
Yeah.
Because of how good this division is. The Rays might win 105, 110 games and still be looking behind them, looking over their shoulder until September 30th. Honestly, it might be the case. And you might be looking at a team in 5th place that's not eliminated until the last week of September.
Gives us
because of how competitive this division is.
Gives us a real hard argument, right, to try to find another wild card team from any other division in baseball in the American League other than the American League East. Being reality, and I know I like to put the cart before the horse a lot of times and make some really bold predictions. Here's one. 4th and 5th in the American League East would be better than the top in the Central and the West. That is a reality that could very well happen, that this division has the best 5 teams in all of the American League and makes a really good argument to expand the playoffs even more than they are already expanded, based on the fact that we are going to see teams that shouldn't be in the playoffs get into the playoffs and teams that should be in the playoffs out of the playoffs. It could very well happen. It's been absolutely unbelievable. Baltimore, as we mentioned, Boston has come really out of nowhere, and everything that didn't come together and all the bounces and bad breaks that happened to Boston last year are all going their way this year. They're getting the breaks, they're getting the bounces, they're getting the hops and the ground balls with eyes. That have propelled them to where they're at with being 6 games over the 500 mark. The division is the story right now. I would say on May 10th, if you were to ask me, what's the biggest story in baseball right now? I would say, look what the American League East is doing. It's absolutely insane, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable. And we might this year have our first year where baseball fans start clamoring for the thing that the NBA fans did many years ago, and what NFL fans have started doing and start talking about eliminating divisions, right? This might be your first year that you have kind of a case in point for those that do like to have that conversation. I never do. Mm-hmm. I'll put that out there right now. I love the divisions. I love the way it's scheduled. I love the locality. I love the geographic rivalries. I love all of what comes with divisions. So I will never be on that bandwagon that tries to make that call. But I feel like this year, if the AL East continues to play the way that they've been playing, maybe this is the first year we start to hear, if it's the Yankees, right? Say the Yankees finish 85, and
that's the one, right? If it's the Yankees, the rule changes the next year.
Right, exactly, because that's the cash cow. You know, you've got New York City, you've got the most popular franchise in the game. 100%, right? That's the straw that breaks the camel's back typically, and maybe it's a modified thing where it's if you finish with X record, you're in, and maybe we'll have a varied number of teams in the playoffs every year. I don't know what the solution is that Major League Baseball would come up with, but you're 100% spot on, right? The Yankees are like the Lakers in the NBA. They're like the Cowboys in the NFL. When it's them, people pay attention, the league pays attention, and the league makes changes.
Absolutely. The one point I'll make about the elimination of divisions, and I'm not saying I'm for it, I'm not saying I'm against it entirely, based on what we talked about earlier in the show with the new schedule changes and the fact that there's no longer near as many divisional matchups as there used to be. It makes a lot more sense to scrap the East, Central, and West when you're already scrapping it from the schedule perspective based on the balanced schedule. They could use that as a catalyst to eliminate East, Central, and West and make American and national.
So here's a question for you to go a step further.
Mm-hmm.
What's the reason now that we have the DH in both leagues?
Mm-hmm.
What's the reason not to just seed them 1 through 30?
It's a great question.
I mean,
it's something to ponder.
If we do,
I don't have a great answer for you on this pod, but
right, because there's no there's no longer a difference.
Sure.
You know, if you're going to get rid of the geographic relevance, there's no longer a reason to have.
And wouldn't you want your best teams playing in
I would agree. Right. If we're gonna make that argument, we want the best teams in. We should make that argument across the entire league.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Something to ponder.
All right, buddy.
Here we go.
Let's talk about your stock.
Let's let it rip. On the stock watch today, and one might look at that graphic and think, he's going to talk about his St. Louis Cardinals in particular and throw them under the bus. I'm a little bit tired of hearing my Cardinals get thrown under the bus. And you see there, Ollie pointing the finger, and he's done a shit ton of that lately. I'm talking about Ollie Marmol, and I'm saying if you have stock in this, who once was thought to be the next up-and-comer of price for Cardinals baseball, and a guy that chased out Mike Shildt because he wanted the job so damn bad, and he knew he could take them to the promised land. And Mike Shildt had just taken St. Louis from the depths of the ashes and won 15 games in a row in 2021 to put the Cardinals into the postseason, and then he was promptly fired, and enter Ollie Marmol. Again, young up-and-comer. Everybody thought he had good stuff. He had a good track record. He was a player's guy, or so we thought, until this season. Flashback, opening weekend. It's game number 1 of 160 fucking 2. Tyler O'Neill, rounding third, pulls up at a play at the plate, and Ollie Marmol publicly throws him in the media under the bus, runs him over, backs up, runs him over again, and then for good measure decided to do a burnout on his knee. I don't know. Tyler O'Neill is in the disabled list. It's probably because he got tired of Ollie Marmol throwing him under the car. Flash forward to the beginning of May. The big splash acquisition for St. Louis to replace probably the greatest defensive catcher we'll ever see play the game in Yadi Molina, and enter a guy that was literally a perfect fit for the St. Louis Cardinals. Couldn't have asked for a better replacement to replace a Hall of Famer than Willie Contreras. Well, St. Louis has struggled recently, and that's really indicative upon their record. The pitching hasn't been great. The offense hasn't been great. When the pitching has been on, the offense has been terrible. When the offense has been on, the pitching has been awful. When both the pitching and the offense are on, the defense can't seem to be able to pick up a ball off the ground to save their life or throw it from second to first. So listen, it's a lot like my golf game. There's just pieces that don't, and they never work together for me to put that perfect score on my scorecard. It's a lot of the things that are going on in St. Louis. And a lot of those things, one would assume, would be corrected as we move forward in the season. And maybe that this would just have been a simple struggle for now, but we are going to get better, and we know we're going to get better. And so we'll just stay the course until you enter Ollie Marmol, who appears to now be less of a player's manager and more of a hothead than I could have ever envisioned from the Cardinals' perspective, who had the audacity to, first of all, bench Contreras in a game, then secondly, answer questions in the media upon benching Contreras and saying, you know what? He's no longer going to be our starting catcher. He placed the blame on the pitching staff solely on how Contreras was calling the game. Now, unfortunately, to his credit, St. Louis was able to go on a 3-game winning streak after the benching of Contreras, and nobody really thought anything of it except for me, who was really pissed off that this guy takes no fucking accountability for his own actions and throws his players under the bus first. And I have managed everything from high school ball to 13U to 10U to 8U, and not once in a loss after a game did I ever say it was that guy's fault, it was Timmy's fault, or Joe's fault, or anybody else's. Even if it was, the first person that gets the blame is me. And I say, I could have done a better job preparing it. I could have done better here. We could have made this move. I should have moved him over in this spot, or maybe made a pinch hit there, and we didn't do it. And we absolutely failed. I have accountability, and so does 29 other managers in baseball right now. The first sign, and maybe the first time that I hit the panic button, is when I saw a manager publicly blast his own guys on the media and then bench them, to the point where Contreras takes down his picture of his St. Louis Cardinals jersey on his Twitter profile. He's not happy. O'Neal clearly isn't happy. O'Neal could be hurt. I get that. And injuries certainly happen. But I also know guys go on the shelf for a lot of different reasons. And maybe one of those reasons is I just don't really feel like playing right now. I don't want to play for this guy. I think that I'm leaning more towards that aspect. Again, I don't want to speculate, but I think there's turmoil in that St. Louis clubhouse right now. And I think I'm looking at one guy that's the cause of that. And that's the one guy that's throwing everybody else onto the bus. I am selling Ollie Marmol stock, and I understand. Again, athletically, this lineup and pitching rotation, and once you get Adam Wainwright back into the fold and bring his leadership back into the clubhouse on a weekly basis where he can go out and get you 6 innings and take the ball, and Wainwright can be that steady guy that sort of steadies the ship, the offense will find its rhythm. I have no doubt about that, and I have no doubt St. Louis will be playing competitive baseball here in the very near future. But I am scared shitless of the guy running the ship. And from your standpoint as a Commanders fan, I think you can kind of agree with this.
Yeah.
You watch games and you just kind of wait and you're like, when is he going to screw it up?
Yep.
When are we going to fuck it up? And then not only when are we going to fuck it up, who's he going to blame it on?
Who's he going to blame?
Who's he going to blame and not himself, and realize that he's got to start taking some accountability. I also think that losing the staff he did now, when it first happened, I had questions, obviously, but I'm like, guys move around from staff to staff all the time. But you lost your hitting coach and you lost your pitching coach in Mike Maddox. And Mike Maddox was going to be a massage therapist of all things until the Rangers said, hey, you still want to coach baseball? And Maddox says, hell yes, I do. Now he's coaching the Texas Rangers, who, oh, by the way, they're first in the American League West. Shocker. And their pitching staff looks great. And the guy going out there and giving the little shoulder clog rubs is Mike Maddox. He was doing that in St. Louis. It is very possible Mike Maddox saw the writing on the wall and said, I'm getting the fuck out of here because this guy's crazy. He's batshit and he's blaming everybody else. And I can't wait till he blames me and fires my ass. And then I don't have a job. He was smart to get out. And I think right now, from the stock perspective, you're smart to get out of stock with Ollie Marmol.
So I have a question for you. So recently it came out that the Cardinals had a legitimate shot at Sean Murphy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not fair, but I'm going to pose the question because I say that it's not fair because Sean Murphy hits in one of the best lineups in baseball, if not the best lineup in baseball. Mm-hmm. Sean Murphy catches one of the best rotations in baseball, right? They're probably a top 5 total, maybe top 3. There's an argument there. Rotations in baseball. But there's been a stark difference between what Wilson Contreras was able to do and what Sean Murphy has been able to do. And John Mozeliak came out this week and said, well, maybe we didn't think about what really went into the catcher position because we've had Yachty for so long. That tells me a couple of things. One, they didn't realize the value of the catcher position if they weren't willing to trade for one of the best young catchers in baseball, and they decided to go after a guy who's 10 years, I think, his elder, right? The second thing that tells me is that maybe Mozeliak shouldn't be in that position. If you don't realize that 60% at any given time, like 60% of managers across Major League Baseball played the catcher position, maybe you should pay attention to how important that position is.
For sure. First point on Mo. He's a clown. He does really, really mind-numbingly stupid shit every now and then, and he says even more mind-numbingly stupid shit if you can believe it. But here's the deal about Mo, and he has proven this over the years, and I have given him plenty of shit as a Cardinal fan over the years. When push comes to shove, he makes the right plays, and he makes the right moves, and he puts the ball club on a trajectory to where it's had its level and longevity of success that the Cardinals fans have been able to enjoy for so long. It might be where you are scraping at the very end and you don't have any more fingernails left to chew because you don't know if this guy's going to make a play. And then at the 12th hour, he makes the right moves. And again, his track record has spoken for itself in terms of the success that the Cardinals organization has had. So yeah, Mo, that's Mo being Mo, Manny being Manny. You know, it's Mo.
He's pissing behind the green monster.
The catcher deal. It came out and yeah, obviously hindsight being 2020, you look at that and you're like, man, we really missed the boat on Sean Murphy. I think it's also fair to say that from the scouting perspective, we really didn't have a great idea of what Sean Murphy could do in a big time lineup because essentially he was playing in Oakland and quite frankly there wasn't a lot of eyeballs on him and certainly not a lot of chatter in terms of the baseball universe. Now, whether or not he was scouted well and was being pushed at heavily by the wonderful scouts in the St. Louis Cardinals organization that have proven their worth and value over the years, I don't know. But what I do know is that you're replacing a legend in Yadier Molina, and name power alone. Is that a cat?
I think it was a dog.
Wow.
A dog.
Okay.
That was.
Well,
sorry. I'm trying to enjoy the weather out here. But I've got trains and.
Oh yeah. Well timed in, dog. Anyway,
dogs out here.
They needed a name, and they needed a splash to satisfy a fan base. That's possessed. That's not an actual dog. That's like possessed. You can go take care of the dog while I talk about Contreras. They needed a name. They needed a big hire, a big splashdown, and that's what you got with Contreras. I don't think from the fan base perspective, I think the backlash would have initially been greater and maybe put him in a position where he wasn't excited to become a Cardinal. He wasn't excited to play for this organization because of you have the fans that are like, oh, we had the opportunity to get Contreras and we didn't get him. You went after the Sean Murphy guy who's young and we don't know what he can do. Obviously, again, hindsight's 2020, but you take a look at, first of all, the name you can land, and second of all, the track record that he has. And we went on a track record that had gone well past its years of expectancy with Yadier Molina, a guy that played his career, hit the peak, and went well beyond his career in Yadier Molina. And then the third thing that the Cardinals have traditionally done, and it's again why I'll back the play, the Cardinals go after guys typically in their own division and typically guys that have absolutely destroyed the St. Louis pitchers and the St. Louis Cardinals. And Contreras was a Cardinal killer. And what better way to alleviate yourself from a Cardinal killer than putting that killer in your lineup? There is three things that I think that were kind of weighing heavily. And when I take a look at things, I don't say I'm mad about the organization for not getting Sean Murphy. Again, hindsight being 2020, you can look and see what he's done since coming up and going into the Braves. But even my perspective, I would have been less excited about Murphy than Contreras when he was first put on the organization. Again, knowing what we know now, sure, I would change my tune. But from the fan base perspective, I would have wanted Contreras.
I think we have established this actually is a feral dog, so I think it's a fox. We have some foxes that run around our fucking neighborhood.
That's their foxes.
Yeah. So
cool. They don't bite, I don't think.
No, as long as you don't mess with them,
yeah,
they're not too bad. They're fucking loud, apparently. I've never heard a fox make that noise though.
Mm-hmm.
But
hey, we just answered what the fox says. We answered.
Yeah. It's not ring ding 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 anymore. It's that.
That's like a crow dog or something.
Yeah, that's fucking wild.
Stuff.
But anyway, let's bring it home. What closing remarks you got for me, bud?
Closing remarks. I'm just going to let that Fox take it away at this point. Closing remarks as we enter into May. Let's just take a gander once again. We've gone on. We've highlighted a lot of the good things that are going on in Major League Baseball. The American League East race right now is hotter than heck, and it's certainly one to be excited for. The other thing that I'm anxiously awaiting, and I say it every year, we're getting closer and closer to the most wonderful time of the year, and that is the wall-to-wall coverage that ESPN provides when we get past the conference tournament and into regional competition. Conference tournaments in college baseball are going to be starting up soon, and this year's college baseball season is even more wild than it was a year ago. Enter in the power and reign and SEC dominance. Look at the top 25. Do yourself a favor and just count the number of SEC teams. Don't count the number of Big Ten teams. You won't have to count long. There's only one team in the Big Ten Conference. That's Maryland in the top 25. But regional play, and again, I have given the major sporting networks a lot of shit for lack of coverage of really good sporting events. ESPN does it right. They are wall-to-wall, 24/7, every regional on ESPN+. They have a strike zone where they whip around and provide outstanding coverage. And again, a lot of people, too, in particular in this pod, have gotten the opportunity to go out and catch some college ball this year. It's so exciting. It's so refreshing. And when we talk about the bad business aspect of Major League Baseball and the bad players out there and the managers that have no accountability, the Ollie Marmoles and the ownership groups of the Oakland A's, and this is the uglies, this is the sin, this is the side of baseball that we don't like to showcase. It is so refreshing and so relieving to be able to watch regional competition and 64 teams try to get into a field of 8 and play in my home state in Omaha.
On that note, bud, we're going to bring this to a close because I got fucking dogs going crazy. Now my dog's trying to yell at the damn fox.
We know what the fox says, and we know who let the dogs out.
Yes, sir. On that note, though, I just want to remind people, man, the College World Series and the coverage leading up to it is unbelievable. Take a few moments from the Major League Baseball season and enjoy the College World Series.